Good afternoon, everyone. I think we'll get started now. We're just after 2 o'clock, but we are expecting one or two more others to join us, and there's lots more seats at the front for those arriving. I'll just check. Okay, we'll get started and we'll leave the doors open in case there's some late arrivals. So thanks everyone for joining us today. You're all very welcome to SEAI's Energy Show this year. We're delighted to be back in person and to see you all and to be here at an event with people, which is a great, exciting day for all of us, I'm sure. And thank you for joining us today in this session where we're going to really focus on leveraging research to decarbonise our industrial and commercial sectors while retaining competitiveness. So I'll just check the clicker and make sure it works. Just a slight technical hitch. Don't know. We're working. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucy Corcoran, and I'm Programme Manager for SEAI's Research, Development and Demonstration Programme. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to be focusing the session on, here's the outline of our session today. So I'll begin with an introduction and an overview of SEAI's energy research, funding and supports. And then we'll hear from Podrick Lyons in the Ierc about the benefits of engaging in energy research in industry and commercial settings. And then we'll move into our panel discussions, which will really be the focus of today's sessions, where we'll look at how you can translate academic research into real-life solutions to enable decarbonisation. And our second panel, where we'll look at green Irish businesses. And is it possible to decarbonise the industrial and commercial sectors while retaining competitiveness? And finally, some closing remarks. So you're all very welcome. And so who is SEAI? Just to really set the scene from the highest level, SEAI are Ireland's Sustainable Energy Authority, and our vision is that Ireland's energy will be sustainable, secure, affordable and clean. And we operate under three key pillars. So the first is to use less to become more energy efficient. Secondly, to use clean to harness our indigenous renewable energy resources. And thirdly, to innovate, which is where we're going to focus our session on today, on research and innovation. So from the policy context, where do we sit? And I'm sure everyone here is aware of the challenges we're facing in our energy sector. But in terms of our national policy, our Climate Action Plan was published in 2021, which sets out over 400 different actions on how we can decarbonise to 2030. One of these is a very ambitious target to achieve 80% of our renewables share by electricity by 2030, and overall, with our Climate Act now in place, to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 51% by 2030. But we're also operating within a wider framework in the European Union context, and just to flag here that as we're a member state, we also have obligations to the European targets and the ambitious Fit for 55 package, which aims to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions across all sectors in Europe by 55% by 2030, and ultimately to achieve a carbon neutral continent by 2050. And obviously earlier this month, there was a major press release from the European Union where there's really plans to target and accelerate our decarbonisation ambitions in relation to the energy security and supply challenges of present. So it's likely that many of our targets will be increased as well in achieving these ramped up ambitions. So what does that mean? Well, when we're looking to the medium and long term, research and innovation is going to play a really key role in achieving these targets. We know where we want to be, but we don't know exactly how we're going to get there yet. So at SEAI, our mandate really is to lead and coordinate energy research supports in Ireland, and we do that in a number of ways. Our main funding supports are provided through the National Energy RD&D funding programme, which runs an annual competitive call for proposals, and it's open to research organisations, academia, industry, commercial sectors as well, and collaborations of these. And that call is launching soon next week, so I'm delighted to have the chance to really tell you all about it now ahead of call launch, so do get thinking about ideas and think about applying to that call coming up. We also engage in research partnership with other funders across the Irish public funding sphere to highlight and ensure energy research is prioritised at a coordinated national level and also at the international level. We run a major conference each year, an annual conference, the National Energy Research and Policy Conference, in the autumn of each year. So that's a great opportunity to bring the energy community together, researchers, policymakers, industry, to brainstorm on a certain topic and to come up with solutions and to help translate research into policy and practice. And then finally, we run calls to appoint Irish experts to take part in IEA international collaboration programs. So keep an eye out for those opportunities as well. So today, and I'm conscious of time, but I will go through a few more slides about the research funding program, because it's a great opportunity for anyone interested in innovating or researching something within their sectors to apply for funding. And it aims to accelerate the development and deployment of energy products, processes and systems in Ireland, to enable barriers to market to be overcome, and also to help grow Ireland's national capacity to develop and apply international class or D&D, and then also, of course, to support and input into policy. Our programme went through a major overhaul in 2018 and has moved in terms of budget from a 1 million annual budget up to a 20 million budget, so there will be 20 million in funding available this year. Since 2018, we've supported over 150 innovative projects that are helping to increase competitiveness within industries, but also to support high-value research jobs, careers and opportunities in Ireland, as well as informing energy policy. And we also collaborate and partner with a number of co-funders as well, which enable us to enter cross-disciplinary areas. So these are some of the key dates, so really keep in mind the call launch is happening next week, and the 12th of April is when we'll have a webinar where you can join online and hear all the details of how to apply for the programme and what funding is available. So keep an eye out for that. And in terms of, I'll run through quickly who can avail of the programme, what funding is available, how to build your project team, and how it's evaluated. So just to give you a sense, it's open to organisations only, so companies, third-level educational bodies, public sector, semi-state bodies who can apply separately or in collaboration with others. So it's an opportunity to partner. And events like today are a great opportunity to meet others and connect with maybe potential partners to build a proposal together. And these are some of the companies that have been supported in our most recent call in 2021. And there's also a range of third-level institutions and public sector bodies as well that have been supported in the past. And there's a really strong emphasis on encouraging collaboration across industries, across different sectors, disciplines, and engaging with research users as well, end users, as much as possible throughout your project. In terms of the funding amount, as I said, there will be 20 million in funding available this year. And those are over projects at different scales. So there's 4 main categories. So small scale projects of up to 1 year in duration and up to max SEAI requested budget of 200,000, ranging right up to larger scale projects of up to 1 million in budget and up to 4 years in duration. And also fellowships as well for academic fellowship positions for postdoctoral researchers of up to 3 years and 300,000 in SEAI funding. So building your team. Start thinking, if you've got an idea, who do you need to collaborate with? And there's different ways of getting involved in a project. So the lead applicant is in charge of the overall management and technical direction of the project, as well as reporting to SEAI and disseminating research outcomes. Partners can also join and be budget holders, so be part of a project. And collaborators, maybe you're not interested in getting involved in the day-to-day running of the project, but you'd like to provide some information or a test site or a demonstration, so you could be a non-funded partner in the role of a collaborator, and that's a great opportunity as well to get the insights coming out of the research itself as early as possible. And again, there's a strong emphasis in our call on collaboration and co-production of your research proposals with as many discipline stakeholders as possible, because we all know the clean energy transition, there's many challenges here, and it doesn't cross just one sector or organisation, it's everyone working together. And how are proposals evaluated? These are the 3 main evaluation criteria, and under each of these there's a number of different sub-criterion, so it's really important to read those criteria, and as you're building proposal and putting it together, to think about those criterion. And your application really is the place where you make the case for your research, why it's excellent and innovative, why it's relevant, why it's impactful, and how you're going to deliver it in a high quality and efficient manner as well, in terms of project management and budget and value for money. And I'm going to quickly just run through. These are a few case studies of projects that are ongoing at the moment. So we have a project led by an SME in Galway, Glassport Bio, in partnership with Ashley Farms and NEY Galway, where they're trialling a new technology to reduce emissions from pig slurry while also enhancing bioenergy output. There's a project here, actually, the MacRH, and we have the project lead on our panel later who can tell us more about that in UCD, monitoring and comparing the in-use performance of air source heat pumps. And if you're interested in finding out more about any of the projects that have been funded through the programme in the past, do check out our National Energy Research Database online, and you can search there and find out more about the projects. It's also a great place to look for potential collaborators if you know you're interested in a certain area or a certain discipline or certain research group's work. You can find details of how to connect with them there as well. And in terms of energy, SEAI supports for industry in terms of reducing your energy consumption and learning more about how to be more energy efficient. There's a great educational resource online, a free resource, the SEAI Energy Academy, for anyone interested in that. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that in our second panel today. And that's a whistle-stop tour. And just to say, I'll be here after the session for any questions as well, if anyone wants to talk to me about the upcoming funding call. I'm delighted now to introduce our next speaker, Podrick Lyons from the Ierc, and I'll move out of the way now. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try the technology as well. Okay, so it's interesting to actually see people again. I haven't probably done something like this in quite a while, so it's a bit of a new experience for some time. So what I'm going to talk about today is the importance of energy research, why we're doing it, and the motivations. I'll talk about the benefits for all stakeholders in collaborating in energy research, and I'll talk about just a couple of case studies to illustrate the points. And then how do we approach collaborative research? How do we get industry and academic institutions and other stakeholders all working together so that we're all kind of heading towards the same sort of goals? And then I'll just talk a few takeaways. So, why do we need energy research now? Climate change is presenting a huge challenge to society, and it's going to require big changes in how we operate our lives, but also to enable those challenges, we're going to have technology as well, that advancements in technology that will support that and enable us to make that transition as easily as possible, because it's not something that we really want to make things very hard for ourselves. It's a difficult enough challenge. It's critical to enable businesses, governments and society at large to reconcile the three aspects of the energy trilemma. So one of the key things that we need to think about, particularly in terms of maybe our electrical infrastructure or maybe our gas infrastructure, is that there's three conflicting goals. These are the requirement to be very sustainable, the requirement to do this transition in as low cost as possible, but also provide the same security of supply and the same sort of standard of living that we have today. So I think some of those thoughts have been percolating through the media over the past few months. And energy research is also, there's great potential there for Ireland as such, and for us to become leaders in the energy field. We here in Ireland are at the edge of the Atlantic. We have a huge wind resource. We're very dependent on agriculture. So there's a lot of things that we can start to understand here and address here that could provide leadership for much throughout the world. And because of that, there should be providing opportunities for industry to develop new low carbon businesses. What are the benefits? Supports the implementation and delivery of commitments on climate change, builds the evidence base for that decision making, supports the development of connections and synergies, bringing both businesses together, commercial entities together, academia together, and where people come together, that's when you have sparks of innovation and inspiration which should drive businesses forward in Ireland. It also has, as I said, the development of new high-value, low-carbon businesses, and businesses in their own business models, if we can do things more efficiently, more cost-effectively, while also bringing down the cost of carbon, for example, it can lead to competitive advantages for businesses in individual sectors. So just to kind of highlight some of the case studies. So one of the case studies here I'm taking of where research has been supported by SEAI in this case is Novo Grid. This is a spin-out company from UCD, and what this company is looking at is providing extra visibility on the networks so that we can operate low carbon renewables in a more efficient manner and also reduce the cost of deploying those renewables. So Andrew Keane from UCD initially had the brainchild of this particular organization, and they're currently working with E.ON, ESB Networks, SSE, and the local enterprise office in SEAI. And currently they're commercializing their technology in the UK. They're working on the commercialization here in Ireland, and they've received an award with respect to wind investment in 2021. So that's showing how research ideas can be translated into new businesses. This example, and I think we probably talked about this organization in some way, our sister organization is Ashley Environmental. Ashley Environmental is a clean tech company, and the research and development that they have undertaken over the past few years, it's focused on a bioenergy solutions for the agriculture industry. And they developed a system called BioWave, which significantly increases biogas production from organic waste. And their development of this product has been supported through a succession of SEAI, FP7, and Horizon 2020 grants that has enabled them to bring their product to commercialization. And now in 2022, this product and this technology has been implemented at full industrial scale. Also, it can contribute to the evidence base. This project is a collaboration between ESB Networks and UCD. And what this was looking at, and I think probably one of our colleagues on the next session will probably talk to this. It's with Paula Carroll. She looked at in situ performance of heat pumps, and this was with the purpose from ESB Networks' point of view is estimating what impact heat pumps are going to have on the electrical network, so they can begin to design their networks to be capable of operating with these new technologies on the system. So that actually translated into a new change of policy for ESB Networks, which is important and is providing additional capability on the network for the future. And we've talked there now about policy, how it's evident, it's changed policy. We've also talked about how new businesses are appearing. And this is an example of where an industry, this is St. Tola Irish Goat's Cheese, they've got involved in a project called Speedier. And this is again funded by the EU's Horizon 2020 program. And they participated in the project. They benefited from some free energy auditing and some advice on what they can do to improve the operation of their business and also reduce their CO2 footprint. And just by participating in this project, which didn't require a huge amount of input from their part, they were able to make substantial energy savings, cost savings, and CO2 savings. So, but it's probably not straightforward, and I think from an industrial point of view, there's somewhat a bit of reticence in getting involved in energy research because the thinking might be that it's going to be difficult, it's going to take a lot of our time, and sure, yeah, that could be the case, but I suppose it's important that maybe there's a few ground rules set up at the start, and getting to build a relation between maybe an academic institute and a commercial institute is really important. And this was some of the thoughts that I had about how this could be done. Identifying the motivations on both sides for why you want to get into the research and why you want to progress something. Clarify what the deliverables in the research might look like, what success looks like in the different elements of a project. Memorandums of understanding might enable freer dialogue so that you can talk to your partners in a kind of in a secure zone, so that ideas may not be passed to other organizations, and make expectations clear. Clarity in all sorts of collaboration is very important, but particularly when we have research and industry coming together, because typically research kind of progresses at a somewhat slower pace than maybe industries are maybe familiar with. And take time. It does take time to get the ideas, it might take a couple of meetings to get those ideas fully formed. Other piece of advice was to start with the challenge. Research and industry are not so far away from each other. You identify challenges in your own business and seek to develop approaches or maybe technology implemented to address them. And research is like that as well, because research is constantly searching for new challenges to address and look at how they can address those challenges. You know, the way research is going these days across the world, it's becoming more and more focused into the real world challenges of businesses and individuals. And that is enabling us to, you know, talk a bit better. I'm from a research institute myself, that we can talk that bit better with industrial partners. Once a challenge has been identified, make sure that there's sufficient time before submission of a proposal. And then there was other points to note that I was just, that I actually touched on there. So that's the research not being incompatible with the requirements of industry. Identifying and addressing challenges is very important, both in academia, research, and in industry. So I'm going to do probably a little quick whistle-stop tour of some of the research programs that enable collaborative research. Lucy has given a very good overview of the forthcoming SEAI RD&D call. So I'm not going to talk to that too much, but it has a number of objectives, and you know, primary among them is to grow Ireland's national capacity, access, develop and apply international R&D, and to provide that support to bodies across government and provide the evidence base to move policy forward. Another really big important program here in Ireland is the European Commission's Horizon Europe program, and so this is the largest research program in the entire world. There's a budget of 95.5 billion over the next 6 years, and it has a whole pile of different objectives that are very similar to what our SEAI will have, and they typically will have, you know, you have a huge range of different sizes of projects that one can participate in. You can have projects that could be worth 20, 30 million euros with 20 or 30 different partners, but also there's much smaller projects where smaller amounts of funding and much less commitment may be required to be involved in a project such as that. SFI, so that's Science Foundation Ireland. Again, SFI has a few programs that might be very, very interesting to industry. They have these Research Development and Innovation Fellowship program. So this supports, it's targeted at supporting industrial interactions, allowing postdoctoral researchers in industry worldwide. And these fellowships can be between 1 and 12 months and can be taken full or part-time. So the idea is that the funding here is to support industrial collaboration. The SFI Spokes Programme enables the addition of new industrial and academic partners and projects to SFI to research centres. And the SFI Strategic Partnership Programme funds strategic opportunities in all areas covered by SFI's legal remit. And these are all about how we can work closer with academic institutions such as ours, can work closer with industry in enabling that. Another organisation, the Irish Research Council, co-funded programme, postgraduates sitting inside an industrial partners, etc. And again, the Enterprise Partnership Programme also enables that, where you have a small support from industry can translate into a significant amount of research that could be benefit for that industrial partner, and that could be taken at postgraduate level or at PhD level. So I'm just probably looking at time a bit. So other potential avenues for where we can collaborate are in the Disturbing Technologies Innovation Fund. So this is going over the next 10 years, and there's 500 million euros worth of funding over the next 10 years to look at new disturbing technologies that can enable the development of innovation here in Ireland in the energy or other sectors. And they seek applications for funding of over 1 million, and it's an annual call. Enterprise Ireland also has a range of different programs that can support industry and academia coming together to develop new outcomes and new technologies to enable the low carbon transition. So just to, that's working? Yeah. So here are the takeaways that I hope, from this talk and for the rest of the day, is that Ireland has research institutions, SMEs and industries that are at the cutting edge of energy research. And we need to build on the relationships that we have today so that we can move it forward and become a leader in this space. Academia and research are very enthusiastic about collaborating with research. It strengthens any proposal that we look to have, and it looks, and it ensures that we are aligned with the requirements of industry and society at large. Commercial and research actives can align and should align to enable the development of mutually beneficial relationships. There's no problem with that. It's something that can be very easily aligned. And the focus on the research challenges, the research objectives of the organisations first, and then find funding calls to support that. Chasing after funding calls is maybe not the best way to approach things, because you may go down and look at developing proposals that may not be aligned with what both organisations really want. And probably from the last few slides, there's a wide range of supports. SEAI, RD&D programme, prime among them, to lead Irish SMEs and SMEs and research organisations, many of which do not require a huge commitment. You can size your commitment to these programs it can be as large or as little as you want. So don't be afraid, and do try and collaborate with research and academia in Ireland. Thank you.
We're moving now into our first panel discussion. So I'll hand over to Kerry Sheehan, Head of Research and Technology in SEAI, who's going to chair this panel discussion, and introduce our third panelist as well, Shafi Kadem, who can, if you want to join the panel, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Lucy. So my name is Kerry Sheehan. I'm the Head of Research and Technology in SEAI. Our department is really looking at what's coming next in a number of areas. The decarbonised heat, our kind of key areas we're looking at the moment is district heating, heat pumps, and on the biofuels, biomass. And then on the decarbonised electricity from grid, onshore, offshore, and ocean technologies. And of course on the research funding, Lucy and her team providing research supports, and also Podrick mentioned Horizon Europe, so we have a team that is a national contact point for looking for energy research through Horizon Europe, so do get in touch if you're interested in that as well. Okay, so today I'm delighted to, first of all, see you all in the room, that's great, and also to discuss with my panel here on translating academic energy research into real-life solutions to decarbonise, to enable decarbonisation, which is a bit, it's something we're always working towards and trying to, how do we adjust our funding programme to enable that. So it's great to have some experts here to give their perspectives. So the format I'll do is I'll introduce the panel, let them talk about their area for a few minutes each, and then we'll open up for Q&A and have a panel discussion. So I'll quickly let you know who's here. I can see on the board, but so Shafi Kadem, am I pronouncing your name correctly, from the Ierc, working also at Podrick in UCC, and Marion Yamet, again, sorry, from the Irish Green Building Council, and Oliver Canan from UCD. So. Shafi, would you like to start and just give a little overview of what you're working on at the moment? Yeah, great, thank you.
So, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So, it's my pleasure. Hello? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everybody. So, it's my pleasure to be here, and just brief introductions about this. We already have very good information from Lucy and Podrick about this session and these topics about this, the decarbonizations, and mostly focusing from the industry point of view. I'm from the International Energy Research Center, and just a brief information about, we do research on this integrated energy systems space, especially the whole network area. So we do deals with these consumers from the buildings and from the communities, then go to the distribution networks and the transmission network as well. So we also have a good space in the thermal energy areas. And we have a good amount of interactions with these industry people, especially for these solutions. And as we said, we are kind of professional research organizations, and we do all the type of collaborations. And we have a good number of projects also with the different funding mechanisms. Obviously, SEAI is one of them, and we deal with different types of problems for the industry. and not only industry, but as well as the network operators and the consumers, and we try to find out the solutions, right solutions for them, and that's our job, basically. So I'll be taking more time, maybe when we'll go to the discussions and where the gaps and the things are. Just a brief one align with their points. One important things I would like to mention here, that's, yes, from the research point of view, what we do, our research work, we do, if you know about this, we are very much familiar with this technology readiness level, from 0 to from 1 to 9, where the ideations and things are coming, and do some early research and do some experiment, then go to the demonstration, and then in the market level. So our footprint is basically in all levels of this readiness level. So we start with these innovations. We listen the problem. We heard the problem from these any stakeholders, from the consumers, anything. And then we try to find out the innovative solutions. And we do start work research on these things that to find out a kind of innovative product or develop some sort of services. So we go these things and we do this research. We go to this some sort of experimental work up to TRL 5, if I say. That's from the research point of view, the researcher point of view, we can do with our own. But after that, if you want to move, we really need industry and the other stakeholders' support. Other than we really can't demonstrate in the kind of real life or real networks. So when you want to go for these TRL 6, 7, 8, that's why we really need this industry. And industry needs also this support from the researcher, on the other hand. So otherwise, we cannot really go on that level, and we really cannot see the real impact of the findings. And that's must to go to the final TRL, the TRL for commercialization or the market of this product. And definitely, we also need, as an applications and this place, the network operators, the whole networks, whether it's electrical or the thermal, whatever it is. So it needs a good combinations of the cooperations with these bodies, the network operators, the commercial and the industry bodies, and the researcher. Definitely, to do all these things, we need some sort of funding supports, and that's why these funding bodies are there as well. So different types of problems and solutions are there, and we all have everything in our place in Ireland, I would say. And we just need a kind of good collaborations and cooperations to achieve these real-life solutions or the real-life demonstrations to go on that level. So thank you very much for this at this moment. So I'll be happy to discuss more in the coming time.
Thank you very much. Marion, please.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marion Jamet. I'm from the Irish Green Building Council. For those of you who do not know us, we are a non-for-profit membership organization, so we have about 280 members, really from the whole supply chain in the construction industry, with architects, engineers, product manufacturers, building owners, a number of research bodies. We have been involved and are still in a number of both SEAI funded projects, RNDD, but also European funded projects, so Horizon 2020 and LIFE type of project. So from our point of view, I suppose, I think, and it was mentioned by Podrick, actually one thing that is critical, it's really like when you go into research, is to make sure that the piece of research is fully aligned with your strategy. I suppose you're not just looking for funding, it has to be for something specific that is fully aligned with your business or your organization strategy. So that's something that is really critical for us in our approach to funded projects. And I think, I suppose, the other thing in terms of the topics we have been interested in, we have mainly been working on energy efficiency, renovation, green finance, but also recently very much looking at wildlife carbon. We're actually working on a project with Oliver at the moment. circular economy and construction. So that would be the topics we are looking at the moment. But just to give you an example, I suppose, from our point of view, because we are a membership organization, we tend to look at research that is close to the market, so things that can be implemented in the relatively short term. So the previous SEAI funded project we were involved in focused very much on skills in the construction industry for energy renovation. So we were working on it with LIT, so no TUS. And really what we did at the time was really to identify key energy renovation skills for both construction workers and building professionals, and to cross-reference that with existing courses in Ireland. And based on that, really trying to identify the gap, but also we did develop an app which is called the Build Up Skills Advisor app, which is really for construction workers, building professionals, to allow them, I suppose, to identify in a few clicks, like courses that suit their need based on their background. And another thing we are working on, because at the time we were trying at way to incentivize upskilling of construction workers, because I think one good thing really that has happened over the last few years is that we have more and more training courses, but it's still difficult to have, for people in the industry to have enough time, I suppose, to go on this course. So one thing we are now piloting as part of a follow-up Horizon 2020 project is what we call an energy efficiency training clause. So the idea of using public procurement really to incentivize upskilling. So really we're trying to make a connection as well between all the projects we are involved in. That's it for the moment. Thanks.
Thank you. Oliver, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oliver Canaan. I'm not from Arup. I'm from UCD, from the School of Architecture, Planning and Environmental Policy there. I'm an engineer in a School of Architecture, and I have a wide range, I guess, of research projects, many of them funded by the SEAI, 3 currently funded by the SEAI, 1 from the RD&D call in 2018 and 2 since in 2021. And I have a number of other projects that are I suppose, more closely linked or with industry players, many of them in the areas of cement and concrete research with Ecosem and with Techrete and other companies. We're doing a big project with the Irish Green Building Council, which is trying to evaluate or quantify the whole life carbon in the Irish construction sector and the built environment. So trying to quantify how much greenhouse gas emissions are related to the construction and to the operation of the built environment every year, and how we might get on a roadmap to net zero by 2050, and also trying to project scenarios to get us to our very ambitious targets in the short time horizon of 2030. The projects I have with the SEAI include a project called Fab Trads, which is focused on historic and traditional building construction, trying to evaluate the in situ operational U-value of those fabrics and the hydrothermal performance of those fabrics and how one affects the other. So that's a project that's just kind of started and will involve a kind of a pretty rigorous experimental routine and then we'll add to the national database or the national methodology so that we have those U-values for traditional construction. 1 in 6 houses in Ireland, or 1 in 6 buildings in Ireland, I think, is of traditional construction, and as yet they're very poorly quantified. So we aim to fill that gap through that project. I have a project called the MacAir project, which was earlier introduced. That's with Munster Technological University, and Paul O'Sullivan, who I saw walk in there earlier, is co-lead on that, and Shane Coakley is also involved in that project. That's a project that looks to evaluate heat pumps in use and try and understand the performance of heat pumps and why there's a performance gap between what the manufacturers claim and the operational performance in use. This is a kind of a project that followed on from our original RD&D project, which is the Nzeb 101 project, which I and Shane Coakley are co-leads on. And that project is essentially evaluating a large data set of Nzeb buildings around Ireland, both retrofit and new builds, and trying to, again, understand how they operate, both as buildings as a whole, how the occupants respond to the buildings and their unique kind of operational modes, and then also trying to evaluate the envelope, the performance in situ of the envelope, and again the heat pumps. And the MacAir project led from the results of that Nzeb 101 project, where we did find that heat pumps were often performing lower than proposed. Somewhere around a COP of about 2.5 was what we were commonly finding. So a good bit lower than manufacturers were proposing, for a range of issues, from installation issues to also over quantification of COPs by manufacturers, where they're very much tested in ideal test conditions and not in operating conditions like they live their lives, I guess. And as I say, that's the kind of, I suppose those projects that I outlined, they kind of, as Podrick was saying, they're the kind of projects that give an evidence base. I can maybe make an evaluation of national strategy and plans and kind of retrofit strategy and try to inform what the best options are as we make this transition. Other projects I have are kind of focused on materials, where we're looking with industry partners to very much reduce the embodied carbon of particularly targeted materials such as concrete, and to try and find lower embodied carbon alternatives for that. So we have a very good project with Ecosem where we're trying to use ground glass recycled as a cement replacement. So it has pozzolanic activities. You can use it up to about 20%, and it kind of circularizes the waste glass industry and gives it another life. So that's a kind of a broad introduction to the projects. I think they're quite close to industry, and they inform industry quite a lot, and we take a lot of the learnings from those projects back into our teaching, where we're trying currently across all schools of architecture in the country. We've been funded by the HEA Human Capital Initiative project to try and reform our curriculums to embed energy efficiency and climate change actions within the curricula. So a lot of this research is really valuable to us for informing what we teach in practice. So I think that will have long-term translational effects as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's interesting. That's great. I'll just open out to the floor if there's any questions. Okay, I have a few of my own while people are thinking. I guess, Marion, you mentioned a kind of aligning with strategy and close to market and a sort of shorter term, whereas the timeline of academic research of Shafi and Oliver are often longer than the timelines of business. So how do we embed that constant innovation within industry, or kind of foster that kind of academia to industry collaboration? And it's kind of a multifaceted question. Anybody can answer, but
thanks, Shafi. No, but I suppose I think the research coming from academia as well, from our point of view, is very important, because we need this robust background information that we can't really have, like what we are working on at the moment. With Oliver team is critical. Like what we're trying to do is to develop a roadmap to decarbonize island built environment by 2050. But what we found is that we didn't really have like good data in terms of the current situation, and like that's where we really saw, like, we know the partnership with universities is really important, because they have the knowledge and the expertise, like, to put together this piece of information for us. So. To be honest, and I think it's the same for lots of projects we are working on, I think it's more about, as it was said in the presentation from Podrick, it's really much about identifying like what you need to do, like in terms of your organization strategy, where you identify gaps, and then approaching researchers in that area and see if they have the time and the interest in working with you on that. But I think it's very much, from our point of view, we work with several Irish universities, and I think it's working quite well, yeah, to get that information.
Okay, thank you. And if you'd like to add, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly one of the challenges is trying to marry the timelines of academic research, because it does take time and needs to be, valid. So it takes time to check it and make sure that we're concluding correctly. And then I suppose, we generally move towards to publish that as open research. But that too takes time. So there is a challenge there, all right. But I think it's moving forward now, because I guess it's been well funded, particularly nationally, and the funding from the RD&D scheme has really added lots to the funding in this field. When I started out in this field, there was much less funding, and we generally would be doing projects focused on building physics or kind of materials or stuff on the side of European funding projects, really, that wouldn't have been core to the deliverables of that, just to to try and do the research that we thought was important. So it's great now that there's specific research to fund particular projects and questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, okay, great. And what are the benefits for business? What, the age-old, what's in it for me, I guess, Oh, you can't hear me. I was just saying, what's in it for business? Why engage in this?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So the thing is, regarding your first questions, also I'd like to mention here that yes, research takes a little bit time. That's very true and very normal. So and we have to allow these things. So we have to understand here that's the research, what we do, or the researcher what they do. We always have to understand the impact of this research. So our ultimate impact is very high, whatever we try to do. The research, so industry have the problems, but we have to find out the solutions. That's true. But for every innovations, we have to find out the impact also, how it will impact ultimately. It's a long-term impact and the short-term impact. It's not only for these industry business as well as from the national point of view, everything. Okay, so that's one of the things we have to take care of this. And that's why the other things also parallelly comes. That's okay. How the business impacts on the business. So we have to think that's okay. When industry comes with the problem or anything, whatever the research we do, there's a issue here is the intellectual property issue. So that things we have to take care here. So there is nothing really to be worried about this industry. That's okay if there's any problem or anything. So if you go to the research body of the researcher, that's okay. That should not be okay. That will take time, and ultimately it will be impact on the business. But it's really happens in the opposite. So it's really helpful for I would say this industry. There's this IP mechanism is there. We have strong mechanisms in Ireland and the dedicated body for these things as well. So there should not be any problem. So.
And I guess just to do a general pitch for my own program, our own program is there's an enhancer, a funding enhancer if you collaborate with academia. So you get a higher percentage of costs. And it's funded with state aid, and you get up to 80% by collaborating. And I think that the loop-back learnings is really good, and the shared experience enhances both the education system, and you're getting the forefront of knowledge on the ground. I'm getting. So how much more minute? Sorry, Lucy. I was
going to say, if anyone does want to ask a question, there's 2 microphones in there. So if there is any burning questions, do raise your hand, and feel free to move up to one of the microphones. Just to check that out.
In the absence of that, I'll carry on. I guess what you see is the easy solution, the low-hanging fruit to decarbonise.
There's no easy solution.
I kind of agree. I suppose it usually the way we present it at the Irish Green Building Council is that, there's many actions that needs to happen at the same time actually to decarbonize the built environment, so it's a bit difficult to pick one, but I suppose a few things we really would love to, we are really focusing on at the moment. One is really the questions of skills, because I mean it's fantastic that we have these high renovation target, and also with the launch of the national retrofit scheme actually, like, you know, last month, or like, I think it gives certainty to the industry, but we really need to invest in upskilling as well, and to better incentivize upskilling. Things we are looking at would be perhaps something similar to a safe pass, but like for energy renovation. And the second thing, I'm just going to put two, really, and that's based very much on Oliver research as well, on the wildlife carbon. I think we need to do more on embodied carbon, because what the research shows is that really if we don't start addressing embodied carbon more, we are going to struggle with our 2030 target in the built environment.
Thank you.
They are not a long-hanging fruit, sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, nationally, like the embodied carbon of cement is a big issue, and it is a real low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's about 90% of our production emissions are related to cement, and we export a lot of that, and we import nearly everything else for the built environment. But we do need to find solutions for the cement industry, and we do have very innovative players nationally. I mean, apart from that, I think the residential sector is an obvious one. It's almost 50% of greenhouse gas emissions related to the built environment, and it's you know, it's a very poor fuel mix still that exists in the residential sector relative to other sectors, and you know, so there's real opportunity to change that and benefit from the work that's been done on the power supply sector. And I suppose the third one would be I would be quite concerned about the amount of construction that's happening, and where, you know, we're demolishing buildings quite rapidly. You know, the buildings are living now 30, 40 years, very short service lives, and they're being torn down and replaced. Like the building across the road is a prime example. That was a building that was built in, I think, opened in 1980 or something like that, and 40 years later it's demolished and it's been replaced by a building that's 4 times its square footage, you know, with materials very high embodied carbon. And I mean, if we continue that cycle, there's no way of avoiding the worst of climate change, really.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, it is true. And I guess with all the new technologies that will be required, do we have the skill set? You mentioned that the new positions are coming on board in the universities. Do we have the pipeline of people to do this?
Well, no, that's a real challenge, really, to be honest. Like, especially like if you look, like, you know, we have energy renovation with, I mean, about 500,000 homes to be retrofitted by 2030s, and we need to build more or less the same quantity of homes. It's estimated by 2040. So really, there is a real competition there between, you know, having the workforce for working on renovation and working on new builds. So that's possibly another reason as well to look, like, you know, about reusing more, and we encourage renovation more. And then in terms of embodied carbon and wildlife carbon, yeah, I mean, we have just started actually a new SEAI funded project, which is called Upfront CO2 with NUIG, and that's very much as well about trying, like, to look at the skills for LCA and getting better benchmark on specific buildings. So we are doing more training, but yeah, no, there is definitely a challenge with both, I suppose, in terms of skills, but also in terms of labor shortages in the industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the schools or the centres of excellence, I think, are a great addition. I did a retrofit course there myself before Christmas and found it very informative for a day course. I learned a lot. So I think, you know, there's a lot of good initiatives happening, and the IGBC are doing a lot of work in the field as well. So yeah, we do need to upskill quite dramatically in academia as well. And the HEA, as I said earlier, have enabled that through funding, and we hope that will have a big impact, essentially doing CPD courses for the teachers so that we can teach the teachers. So if people can engage in that, we'd be delighted to get greater engagement from industry.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Yeah. I would just say a few things. I mean, my background is ex-UCD initially, but electricity industry R&D in the UK, working with what was in TRL5 to TRL8 is enormous. It's man-years of development on some of these projects. So I would love to see some really, massive research facilities, either identifying the top 20 energy-using applications in food industry, and then have several 400 people research centres, multinational, not in Ireland or not in Europe, but funded multinationally to then say, well, we will make inroads into those 20 big energy users in food industry. All the same with cement or buildings. And I just don't think we are addressing that step, because I've worked for 30 years in that industrial bridge between academia and industry, and I don't think the funding has been put into it to make the impact that needs to happen, because it's tens of man years sometimes to take a technology from, and funding can do it. For example, you can also take something from the lab, 4 loaves of bread, to a full-scale production oven baking bread with microwaves. You can do that in 12 months if the company wants to do it. So it's possible, but it just needs money and needs huge engineering and knowledge of the technologies.
Absolutely, yeah. But there's huge opportunity there, right? And I think we need to change the narrative a little bit as well. There's a lot of talk about this transition being a big cost, or who's going to pay for it, or these kind of questions are being asked quite a lot. But there's real opportunity for innovative research and innovations in industry that we should embrace, I think.
For example, Denmark have said we are going to displace all our fossil fuels to electricity by something like 2030, and that's all the building industry, all the firing of bricks, all these industries are going to move to electricity, and so there's a lot of engineering to be done I don't mean to have industrial heat pumps. There's a lot of support now in Ireland for industrial heat pumps, but there's huge scope for industrial, not just heat pumps, for industrial heat pumps, like steam recompression. So the new schemes that have been launched in Ireland, there's renewable heat subsidy, and then there's the new heat pump scheme. Do industrial heat pumps qualify? As in not domestic heat pumps. So a food company upgrading low-grade energy using a heat pump, a steam compressor. Does that qualify for support in Ireland? That's one of the reasons to do it. Do we know?
I will come back to me afterwards. We'll have a chat.
For an example, then, a distillery which is distilling whiskey, and all the vapour that comes off the top needs to be condensed. Well, if you condense that using hot water instead of river water, you've got hot water at 80 centigrade. I'll throw a scenario. So you can take that, you can raise steam at 80 centigrade, and you can recompress that in a heat pump, a steam compressor, to 1.5 bar. You compress it 3 times, and use that as the energy source at the bottom of the still. So you're not burning gas, you're not burning oil for your still. You're recovering the latent heat that came off the top and putting it back in at the bottom of the still. And these were done 20 years ago in the electricity industry, and there's huge potential for industrial heat pumps.
Okay. We might just have a chat with you afterwards. There's a few more questions, and I'm getting looks at the session's over. Sorry, there was a gentleman here first. Yeah.
Andrew Smith, UCC.
Hi.
Really interested in the work you're doing on zero. Sorry, I was trying to do it properly as well.
Could hear you.
So really interesting to see the work on zero carbon concrete and low carbon clinker and cement going on, and on the upskilling in the Green Buildings Council. And it looks to me like that gives us 2 legs of the stool for cleaner buildings, and the third leg is about regulation and enforcement. And I wondered, is that part of your research? Is that part of your research, is that within the SEAI remit? And who is it that's bringing all of those strands together, like joining up the materials and the skills and the regulation and enforcement?
Yeah, I do think it is an evolving space as well, that is actively being looked at to join the dots and all of that, and to make sure we've got a kind of cohesive, sustainable ecosystem when we bring it together. But yeah, it's a live issue at the moment.
So is it your capacity that does it, or is it within the individual projects?
Well, actually, the final deliverable of our Nzeb 101 project is to try and inform a new compliance methodology, a possible new compliance methodology. So we hope that the research does, and we kind of outline how it might, you know, and I suppose that's how, as far as we take it, you know. But there's lots of good learnings from the research that can help, you know, inform a new compliance methodology, I think. You know.
And it does become more, it's going to become more and more mandatory with each directive coming from the EU to certify sustainability. So it's you know, it's in train. Okay, thank you.
Can I just very quickly?
Sure,
Yeah, just on the roadmap we are developing for decarbonizing the built environment, it will include recommendation on regulation. So we are still in the process of working on that. So if you have ideas or suggestions, please talk to me. We are very much consulting with everyone at the moment.
Hi, just a quick one, Kerry. I don't know, you may or may not know this, but seems to be a lot of good research happening, and I suppose after seeing what everyone's talking about, I'm kind of enthused to look into a bit of research myself. Have you any kind of broad numbers or percentages on how many applications actually get approved and what the success rate is for applicants? And the other question would be around, I suppose, academia and being associated with an academic institution. How much more successful would an application be, say, if they have an academic institution with them?
Sure, I don't know, Lucy, if you want to run with it, or I'm happy. I'll run with this. Yeah, I guess just on the kind of permutations of the applicants, it can be industries collaborating with each other. It can be industry and academia collaborating with each other. It can academia on their own. There's no set format of what the consortium should reflect what the challenge of the research is. It should make sense to explore what you're researching, and it should be the right mix. It can be academic mix or otherwise, whatever makes sense. And each project all the projects are evaluated on the merit of the project and the impact. Like what difference is this going to make, or this study is going to make. And that's the Lucy was going through the evaluation criteria earlier. So it's less about kind of enhancers depending on the consortium mix. It doesn't make sense for what you're trying to do, and that's the overriding aspect, really. Is it the right configuration? Give the right people in the room for the challenge you're trying to address. So in terms of stats, approximately 50 projects are awarded each year, and then depending on how many applications and depending, we've kind of cap of money that we can fund to. But I think it's been in and around 30 to 40% success rate. But there's, you can be consortiums or up to how many? Up to 4 and approximately 4 or 5 organisations can make a consortium. So that's approximately, yes.
Just to add, I think that's a really good question, and it is a competitive call, so asking the questions now is really important, and coming to the webinar on the 12th of April, sorry, I'm looking at you now, is a good chance to hear all the details of the evaluation criteria and how to put together your application, and there's guidance documents that'll be published on the website as well. But I definitely encourage you to join the webinar, and you'll get the details then. But asking the questions early is a really good sign, and the call will be open for 5 to 6 weeks, so there's still time to start building and building your proposal. Thanks.
Yes. Sorry, this would probably have to be my last question, but do approach any of us afterwards. Yeah.
Hi, Chukwu Okori from ESB Energy Management Systems. Although this question is not about energy management, I just wanted to ask if maybe any research is being done, say with I'll say your business partners being companies, especially the ones that are dealing with international sales. So especially with the talks of life cycle of say, carbon in products. Is that kind of included in like research here, the products that are being sold, let's say internationally? And is there going to be like directives that would enable, say, an example of maybe you're selling a bottle of Coke to a country that can't really recycle the bottle? Is stuff like this kind of being included into research, or say directives that would allow, say, said companies to have lists of, say, parameters that different countries will have to meet before they can get such produce? Is such things like this being applied in your research? So it's just a question I have.
I guess we're more been looking at the kind of Irish circumstance through the RD&D programme, but maybe Enterprise Ireland are looking forward to, from that company lens and that export lens. But of course, there's always benefits locally, even if it's, we're one planet, so that the benefit is felt. I'm trying to think if we've got any examples of that, or...
Well, the whole life carbon project we're doing with the IGBC is looking at consumption emissions. So it's the emissions that we use in the country as opposed to just the emissions that we produce. So it's if we import aluminium window frames, it accounts for those window frames and the steel that we use in the country. We don't produce any steel here, so the emissions that we import with the steel are accounted for in consumption emissions, and they're accounted for within that study. The study we were doing, both I and Marion were outlining the whole life carbon in the construction and built environment. So we try to, yeah.
Just to add, I guess it's a great question, and really all the problems we're facing we're not alone in Ireland, so other countries can learn from what we're developing here through all these research projects. And I think the application form has a section that talks about what the potential impacts of your research would be, and it is to consider both at the national level but also beyond that. And it's something I'm sure all the researchers consider when they're building their proposals. And I know we're getting tight on time, so I'm sorry to interrupt, because I know we need to do a quick short changeover before the next panel session. So if there's more questions, are there more questions now? But I'd say there's 10 minutes now before the next panel will start, so feel free to say hello to maybe the panel members.
And thank you very much to
and
my
yeah,
panelists.
huge thank you to all the panels today. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to kick off the next panel now shortly. And if anyone would like to move up closer to the front, we've had a bit of a changeover, so there's a few seats free if anyone would like to move closer and get closer to the panel and maybe ask some questions. You're welcome to move up to the front. And we're delighted now to kick into the second of our panel discussions this afternoon, and we're now going to focus on greening Irish businesses. So is it possible to decarbonise the industrial and commercial sectors without hampering competitiveness? And I'm delighted to introduce the chair of the panel discussion today, Dr. Lisa Ryan from UCD, and I'll let Lisa introduce herself and the panel now, and we'll get started. And do think about your questions, and again, the microphones are here in the centre for later on if you want to ask anything. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Welcome, everybody, to the second panel session this afternoon. We're going to switch slightly now gear in terms of what we're going to talk about. And the title is, this is really about, how do we decarbonise the industrial and commercial sectors? So hopefully we can still feed research into it, right? Research is still very important in terms of innovation and driving this decarbonisation. But we're really going to look at the sectors now, and we've got a very good panel who will provide us with the benefit of their thoughts. So, I am Lisa Ryan, and I'm a professor of energy economics in UCD, and I'm in the Energy Institute in UCD and the School of Economics. The Energy Institute in UCD is where we carry out a lot of this kind of sustainable energy research, and it brings together different disciplines from engineering, economics, social sciences together. I'm also on the board of SEAI. Today was my last board meeting, so I'm not much longer on that board, but just to be clear that I do have an affiliation with SEAI as well. But now, getting to my panel, I think I'll start here with, we have, I won't say your names, and then perhaps you'd like to introduce yourselves and give more details when it comes to you. So I have Xavier Dubuisson from RetroKit. Then we have Fergus Sharkey from SEAI, who's head of, I'm going to check your latest title, Business Supports and Transport from SEAI, and then Daniel Ring from Lawler Sustainability Energy Services, I think, isn't it? Okay, so what we'll do is, I think each will introduce themselves, maybe a little bit more detail, and give your perspective on this topic, on the decarbonisation of industrial and commercial sectors. Maybe I'll take the opportunity to ask people to turn off their phones too. Okay, so maybe starting with you, Xavier. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah? Okay, better. Good. Well, actually, I feel like a slight imposter, if that's the right word, because actually, RetroKit is all about home energy upgrades. So we're really focused on the residential sector. But maybe the linkage is with the fact that we are working very closely with the supply chain, with the one-stop shops in particular, and how they can leverage data to support their processes and make them more efficient, more productive, and reduce costs, and really enable them to upscale their operations, which is where the large impact is happening from a decarbonisation point of view. And it kind of links also with dimensions around decision-making in terms of solutions being applied, and it was really interesting to hear about carbon content in particular from that point of view. And that's something we want to build in our analytical tools as well, so that we can provide that dimension into the decision-making about investment, etc.
So is RetroKit a piece of hardware? What kind of?
No, it's a software platform.
It's a software platform.
Yeah,
okay.
so it's a data management system with strong analytical tools to help analyze the current situation, model different energy and renovation scenarios, and then support the delivery of projects once they're
very good. Okay, thanks, Xavier. Fergus, over to you.
Yeah, so Fergus Sharkey, I'm the head of business supports and transport in SEAI. So in relevance to today's discussion, I'm responsible for a range of supports to business, from small business to large industry. So there's a number of programs you might be aware of under my responsibility. So we've SME supports, including the Energy Academy, energy management training, and an audit voucher scheme. We have a large industry energy network, which is a network of the 200 largest energy users in Ireland. So everything ranging from the heavy industry like aluminium and cement to the more sort of things like pharmaceuticals and med tech and all that comes in between. We have two large capital support schemes, the Exceed grant scheme, which is very applicable to industry, and the stuff it's supporting at the moment is broadly in line with what we're talking about. And the support scheme for renewable heat, which is supporting biomass heating and heat pump systems in both industry and the built environment. So a large amount, I suppose, of dealing with industries at the front line, understanding, how they make their investment decisions, the technical and practical realities of project delivery. So hopefully that's beneficial to the conversation, Lisa.
Yeah, I think so. Sounds like you're the person to meet if you're a business.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Daniel Ring. I'm the Managing Director of Lawler Sustainability. Lawler Sustainability is, I suppose, a modern day one-stop shop for industry in terms of sustainability and decarbonisation. I suppose our origins were from a 40-year-old business that was mechanical and electrical consultancy, and we've evolved now in the last 5-6 years to offering advisory around energy reduction, to, I suppose, helping nudge people and through, realising that using the old model of construction wasn't really working, and tailoring that to we'll do the delivery piece as well. So effectively, from a advisory piece, we're mapping the net zero carbon journey. So how are you going to bring your building stock, your portfolios from where you are now to net zero? So if we look at decarbonisation of the grid, and we look at global warming, and we look at your stock, and we carry out upgrades, how far does that bring you? And how much do we know about the solutions in terms of offsets or new technologies to get you the rest of the way? And in honesty, it's a bit of crystal ball gazing when we look a good bit down the line. But there's a lot of thought going into that, and I'm very hopeful that that end game will become clearer, through the things we spoke about earlier, through research. So the other project model that, the other thing that research has helped us with is the development of new business models. So we're involved in energy performance contracting with Dublin's local authorities. So Dublin City Council, Dún Laoghaire, Rathdown and Fingal are the first energy performance contracts to come to the market. And I suppose the premise of this is we make the investment, and it's repaid from the savings. So it kind of de-risks the client from that perspective. And just in terms of, I see decarbonisation as one tentacle of a much broader agenda in terms of clients' needs. So the people that we work with are tending to look at a sustainability challenge, and within that there is decarbonisation. So when we talk about how do they remain competitive, a lot of companies, it's that old adage, threat and opportunity. So a lot of people are seeing this as an opportunity. So the early mover advantage, or the risk of not moving at all. So we're seeing a lot of that in the marketplace, working, I suppose, with the public sector, but also the private sector. It's really important for them. There's things like buying decisions. Will a customer turn away if they don't like the look of how my company is, and how I'm facing up to sustainability or global warming? Even things like logistics companies, we're seeing them now turn to us and say, okay, can you LEED certify my warehousing? So it's a real change landscape, really exciting landscape out there. So that's just a little bit about ourselves.
Thanks, Daniel. I think you're going to answer all the questions there if I let you go on. But the way I'd like to run this session is, so I have a set of questions here that I think would be of interest, but I can go through, we'll kind of start a discussion here among the panel, and then I'd encourage you also, I'll open it to the floor and ask, invite you to ask some questions as well, if that's okay. I think we have until, 10 to 4? 10 to? Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes. I think that's good. Okay, so I mean, Daniel, you were starting to get onto, you know, the different reasons companies are getting into decarbonisation. Like, are there specific benefits that you're seeing to companies?
Yeah, so our early interaction with companies would have been, we can save you money.
Yeah,
So I think the conversation has progressed significantly, and it's still quite important. So, you know, we would look at potential customers, and a sweet spot customer would be, they need to save money, but they also have an agenda, a strong agenda around sustainability. And I think that grouping is gathering. There's huge momentum. And I would even look at the certification systems for buildings, where we were like environmental evangelists trying to make people do things. But, you know, once the first developer built a building along the canal and said LEED Platinum on the front of it, all of a sudden there was a market change.
Right.
No one else was going to build one without LEED Platinum on it. So there's great and rapid change, I would say, in the market.
Okay, yeah, I think that is very interesting. That I think it used to be before that maybe companies who were customer facing were most interested in terms of, but now it's the supply chain, like the wider business world is more interested as well.
It is, yeah.
So Fergus, I was going to come to you in terms of what would you say are the first steps that, you know, if a company is thinking of, you know, reducing their carbon footprint or getting along this decarbonisation path, what do they need to do, or what do you suggest they do?
Well, they need to make a business decision about it, so it needs to be a strategic decision rather than a bolt-on. So really, you know, setting themselves a goal or a target, and as Daniel said, understanding why they're doing it. Is it just chasing cost savings? Is it to capture new consumer or new markets? Is it because their financial providers are telling them that they're going to have a problem getting finance in a couple of years' time if they don't have clear sustainability credentials? So, you know, really, you know, what we're talking about, you know, and what we're sort of trying to stitch into a lot of businesses is the concept of energy management, emissions management, managing it like you would your finances. So having a structured approach to it, continuously monitoring it, targeting your big hitters, making a plan to address them. And you know, and that's the bit that I see a lot of businesses stuck at the moment, which is making the plan, because there's a lot of uncertainty about which way will we go. If we go heat pumps and there's green gas in 3 years' time, are we going to lock ourselves into a fuel choice that's going to be bad for our business? So when I was reflecting on the topic of discussion, that's, you know, can a business be competitive? It can be competitive if everybody moves in the same direction and has the same pressures. But there is this competitive, if you wish, a competitive barrier to this at the moment, which is if I'm the first mover and I make the wrong move, or, you know, alternatively, if I don't make any move, either of those present enormous risks to a business. And I think, you know, so really it's about building knowledge, capacity, and having a robust and credible plan. And, you know, that's the kind of fundamentals of the shift in business decarbonization that I've seen, and they're the ingredients for, you know, a big step change that's going to be necessary.
And do you find, I mean, obviously businesses who are thinking of decarbonising, they are energy users. Do they have good knowledge of their energy, or how they're using it, or their energy profile? Or any of you, if you'd like to answer that, I mean, in your experience, you would think that a business, you know, the stereotype is a business is better than a household at you know, making those strategic decisions, because they, you know, they are profit maximizing, and so they should know how they're using their energy. But anecdotally, I hear it's not the case. So.
Well, I don't mind answering that unless, do you want to answer? Yeah, look, it's a spectrum again. You know, you've small businesses who really don't. What we find with the smaller entities is they really don't understand how energy is impacting their bottom line, you know. And the simple example of that, if Conor Malloy is in the room, I always borrow this from him, which is ask a business owner how many things they'd need to sell to make €5,000 in their hand, profit after tax. But if you can give them the tools to save €5,000, that seems like hassle. But so they can equate one and can't equate the other. Large businesses really have probably broadly woken up to this in a major way. I certainly think they have in the last few months anyway. You know, I'm hearing of some large businesses that their projections for this year, they were initially projecting 4 million on energy. That's now 5.5. They're probably looking at next month, it's going to be 6.5. You know, it's huge changes happening, so there's going to be an increased focus on it. But yeah, definitely the small and medium businesses are probably struggling with understanding the scale of the problem, let alone understanding the solutions.
So I think, like, it seems to me that one part of it is these kind of tools and platforms, a little bit like you have in Retrokit for homeowners. Do you have experience, Xavier, with businesses in terms of providing advice and how?
The other hat I would be wearing is I'm a consulting engineer and specialized in sustainable energy for 25 years at this stage. And what I've seen actually is over the last 3 or 4 years, the industrial sector knocking on the door, looking for advice and support, and that wouldn't have been my client base for until then really. And the angle for me was biomethane and looking at green gas in particular and the solutions there. And we've always been interested in what I call local energy planning, so looking at a community, a region, a town, and of which industry would be part of the ecosystem, and how you can shift and do the transition at that scale. And in that context, bioenergy and biomethane in particular is really interesting, because you've got the industry, the food sector is actually what I'm referring to in terms of client base, and they are embedded into the primary production, which is the food, and that the turning those ingredients into stuff people buy on the shelves, right? And understanding that the whole value chain needs to be looked at. It's not just the fuel we're burning, it's how we're producing our meat and our milk, etc. And from a decarbonisation point of view, what I see is that they're moving from the finance piece to the carbon accounting piece, and that's really transformational, and it requires very powerful analytics and data to feed into that. And for us at Retrokit, actually, there's a parallel in that we've been focusing on the widgets that go into an energy upgrade and what that costs, etc., and how much energy it's saving. But now we'll have to think further and look at what's the carbon input into those solutions, those widgets, and build that into the analysis. And within industry, we'll have to do the same. And so having the right data to do that is fundamental, and it's capturing what's there within the management of the operations of the company, etc., and then learning from what academia is doing and others are doing to bring that extra dimension, which is not a preoccupation so far, and doesn't really, there is not a database in someone's computer in that company that says, oh, the milk I'm getting has got this amount of CO2, and therefore, and so there's a lot to do in that regard. I really think that's where the forefront of innovation in that space needs to go, is to have that extra dimension in decision making into the analytics that inform those decisions.
Yeah, so I mean, there you're starting to get into the whole supply chain, that it's not just your consumption at the end of the end product. Daniel, have you experienced, do companies, are they starting to care more about their full supply chain? I don't know if this is really your area.
Yeah, no, we certainly have seen that, where when you start to look at your emissions footprint, and it's divided into scope 1, 2, and 3. So 3 is your consequential footprint. So that's upstream and downstream. So so we work a lot with retailers. So it's like, okay, all of the food producers coming into our business, how are they behaving? How are they acting? How are they changing? And then downstream, our customers, disposable plastic packaging, all of that. So there's a huge move at the moment that we're seeing, and in reality, the consequential footprint is massive in relation to, it's frightening when you see it laid out for some industries. You say, how are you going to manage that? But at least the conversation is starting, and people are facing up to it, and the challenge is there, and there's the early signs of life in terms of action, I'd say.
Do you want to come in on this topic? You have a question there?
So on that basis, do you see the targets for 2030 and 2050 being met, even though there's no mandatory push, like we saw with, say, the masks we brought in and all the government regulations? Do you see it being urgent enough to push towards
I think it's going to be a struggle. I think it needs guys like you, the young people, to give us older people just a shove out the door and say, listen, this is really urgent.
Speak for
Are you
yourself.
feeling threatened?
Yes, yes.
Right, you can be with the young people. Yeah, so I definitely would have some concerns around it. I think it's gonna, you're gonna have to vote with your feet. You're gonna have to just, really it's gonna have to be really backed hard as an agenda and pushed.
Like there's another,
No, go on.
Yeah, there's another interesting space, and that kind of the carbon offsetting you've mentioned earlier. And for me, let's say consumers have a lot of power in that regard, right?
Yeah.
And so not only are we using and buying those products and disposing for maybe 90% of what's being produced in the process of consuming, and we left to change our attitudes, I think, generally speaking, in that regard. But there's also opportunities for industry and the supply chain to work with consumers, homeowners, in offsetting some of their emissions and proposing solutions whereby you as a consumer buying our stuff will give you credits to do energy upgrades in your home, for example. Imagine a marketplace in Amazon where suddenly, you've purchased something that gives you such credits to you, and that builds up in your, let's say, wallet, and eventually Amazon will be knocking on the door of a bunch of solar panels and install them on your roof, and your credits will work against that. And those linkages with the kind of digital solutions and platforms and data exchanges that are happening at that scale are totally envisageable. It's new business models, and I think innovation at this stage is not just the techie stuff, but it's about the business model and how do you offer win-wins for the different stakeholders in the value chain, which is not just the supply piece, but also the end user.
The other thing we're seeing linked is the environmental agenda with the social and governance agenda.
Yes.
So boiling it down to something simple like a pair of jeans. Where is it produced? How is it produced? Who is producing it? What's the conditions? What energy intensity goes into that, and carbon intensity? The transport routes. It arrives in a shop. It goes out. How many times does it have to be washed? So there's things we never considered before across every item we use and everything that we consume. Now there's a discussion and I suppose an analysis of it, which I think is really great. But a bit
So do you think, there's a lot of rules coming in about this carbon disclosure, for example. Is that driving, are businesses aware of that already in terms of, in making their decisions on their supply chain, that they're going to have to disclose like the full length of what they're doing? Is that on people's agenda already?
That's a real concern. Obviously it's been phased in, but people are organising themselves around this new landscape, and it's it provides a real challenge for them.
It's still, and to this gentleman's point, it's still very reliant on, if you want, broadly speaking, market forces. You're relying on business to respond to consumer demand, regulatory nudges. I don't think there are shoves yet, and there's certainly not hammers yet. And that's the piece. So are we going to do it? If we rely on businesses to do it, if you wish, based on market forces, it ain't going to happen. So it needs to be.
I honestly, I don't understand why we had 2 years of, say, a carbon break where there was very little industry activity, yet my background is earth sciences, so what I learned in my 4-year degree is that it's largely too late for us. If we don't hit these 2030 targets, 2050 targets, there's no, it's my generation, it's the next generation. I'm coming from a point of view of, I don't know if I'll even have kids because it's going to be a dystopian world for them,
Yeah, and look, and they're completely legitimate concerns, and this is at the core of the issue, which is the transition needs to happen at such a pace, and not 10 times quicker than it's happening, probably not 100 times. Yeah, it needs to happen So at the moment we're in a position where we're waiting on businesses to respond to broadly market signals and maybe competitive tensions. That's not going to cut it. Okay. So it's got to hit where we need to hit. It's going to require it's going to require us to make it happen and not make it an option. And back to the theme of the discussion.
Yeah, let's come back to that, because I
but
think
if everybody has to do it,
yeah,
then competitiveness is not really that big a feature.
yes, if everyone's doing it. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to come back to, I think we agree that this is something that we have to do, and so I think what this session should be doing is helping provide ideas for businesses in the industrial sectors on how they can decarbonise. That's what I'd really like to get to. That's going to be provide some practical ideas, because I think we could spend a lot of time saying how difficult it is. But I think we have our next
I think
question, comment.
Norman Maloney. I think there are lots of ideas how we can decarbonise, but doing it, and it comes back to what Fergal said, we're going to have to do it and do it fast, but are we going to meet our targets for renewable energy? No, we're not. We didn't meet them in 2020, and the government paid 50 million euros for 4 terawatt-hours of electricity from Estonia and Denmark, just handed it over because we didn't meet our obligations 2 years ago. We're not going to meet our obligations at the next assessment. And that 50 million euros could have built 10 megawatt biomethane plants, or we're struggling to get AD and biomethane into agriculture. It could have built 50 farm demonstration AD plants. So my question to SEAI kind of is, you're close to government. So can we not let this happen again? Can we not let this cycle of not meeting our targets, paying penalties to the EU, enormous penalties that could be the stimulus for anaerobic digestion in the country, or industrial heat pumps, or a centre of excellence? £50 million could build a centre of excellence. So we are going to do the same again in whatever the next assessment is, 20 this year maybe, or something like that. And we will buy renewable energy from other places. We would be better spending it, or try and even say to the EU, we will spend this money, don't penalise us, we will spend it, credit us, and you'll get the return. That's sort of it's DCC, it's Department of Agriculture, Fisheries, Marine, whatever it's called. I'm too long in the UK. It's these entities in Ireland need to step up and incentivise, and genuinely just put the money, stump up the money.
Thanks, Norman. So I'd like to turn that question around. We have another one in the audience now. Coming to you next, I promise. Just to turn that around, so I think Norman's point is valid. We have, not met any targets so far. Our track record is not good.
We've met a few.
Yes, but we didn't meet the main one, which was the CO2 emissions one.
Not by a long way.
Not by a long way, and not renewable energy. So taking Norman's point there, if you had, all the money, like the 15 million, which we actually are spending more than that, actually in SEAI now, but where do you think the biggest quick win would be for the industrial and commercial sectors, the theme of this section?
Fundamentally, the first question to ask is, when it comes to industrial and business decarbonisation, is who pays? So there are two pots of money. There's taxation and there's consumer spending. Now, when we think about a very easy business that makes microchips, for example, do we feel like the taxpayer should pay to make that investment, or do we feel like the people that buy microchips should make that investment? So that's the first thing, which is, where does the money come from for this? And I think, broadly speaking, that decision has been made. But what are the opportunities that we have at the moment? And actually, the heat study from Kerry's directorate is a fantastic document. It's the closest we've come to a plan for decarbonising. We don't even have a plan, but this is as close as we've come to for a plan for decarbonising industry. And I was listening to that gentleman earlier. So what's evident in that is that there's a major opportunity in energy efficiency, there's a major opportunity in electrification of heat, there's a major opportunity in bioenergy, but there's limiting factors. And, hydrogen and things like that and CCS and so on, they're not really going to make any dents this decade. So that's what's come out of that. So where would I put the money? I put the money into radical energy efficiency, and I put the money into rapid electrification of heat, is the short answer to that.
Okay. No, obviously these can be developed further, but I'm going to give this gentleman here a chance because he's had his hand up for a while.
I don't want to derail your discussion on it, but I come back to this man's question and Norman's point as well, and I think I see a huge amount of research being done huge amount of activity, huge amount of goodwill, huge amount of whatever. And it's not coordinated. There was a talk this morning about retrofit, the need to scale the number of people who can do this retrofitting simple work. It doesn't appear this SEAI talk to Solus. There's no joined-up thinking. There's a climate advisory council. Nobody's accountable, as far as I can see. Just to go back to one other point, there were a number of targets set. I don't know when they were originally set, and then they were changed, the emissions targets, so they're loaded towards the end of the 10-year period. So it's a fudge before we even start. So somebody said to me once, who's in charge? No, if nobody is in charge, it's not going to happen. I was on an SEAI webinar a while ago, and I asked, whose responsibility is it to meet these targets? And I was told, it's everybody's responsibility, and everybody knows if it's everybody's, it's nobody's. And I agree with this man here. What's going to happen is we'll get 6, 7, 8 years down the line, and we'll have something like what had to be done for COVID. The government will say we're going to have electricity cuts, power cuts, because it wasn't acted on soon enough. It's almost inevitable. That's the way we're going. And I don't think I'm the only one in the room who sees that. So.
Do you have a proposal?
Yeah, okay. Yes, yeah. Somebody should.
Is the minister not responsible?
The climate who? Well, you tell me who's responsible.
Well, I was just wondering.
The Climate Advisory Council. I don't know what their role is. It's advisory. The Department of Energy. I don't know what their role is. It's not the minister's responsibility. If it's nobody's responsibility, it's not going to happen.
I don't violently disagree with you at all. This is an enormous challenge. It's quite intimidating, and we're so far off the mark. It's quite depressing at times. What I would say is, you know, and I'm no advocate of any government or anything like that, but it has moved on enormously over the last number of years. So who's responsible? Each government department, and therefore each minister, is now responsible for the emissions under their department. So the Minister for Agriculture is now responsible for agriculture emissions. The Minister for Enterprise, Leo, is now responsible for enterprise emissions. 2 years ago, it was Eamon Ryan was responsible for everything energy and emission related under one minister. So all of this has been spread out. Accountability then is, the Climate Change Advisory Committee, I've been in with them, trust me, there's accountability about what's actually being achieved versus what's being targeted. There's also an Oireachtas committee which is going to hold these departments and ministers to account. What's really important now is the 50 million this gentleman mentioned earlier. The last time that came out of, if you wish, general taxation, came out of the Treasury, right? So nobody really felt the pain of it. If enterprise, seeing as we're on that topic, misses its target, which I think most people in the room would put a good bet on, in 2021 to 2025 period, DETI's budget will be cut to pay for that. So the minister is responsible, the Taoiseach in this case at the moment, at this present time, and the department responsible is going to have to pay for any penalties for missing the target in their sectoral ceiling. So that's a lot further forward than we were a couple of years ago. It's still, you know, one could argue that it's still a way off. So what SEAI are mandated with, I suppose, is the action end of that. So that's all targets and governance and responsibility. We're there to work with businesses to identify the right way forward. We can only disperse the funding that's available to us, and we do so in a very targeted way. But back to what I talked about, who's going to pay for this? And the competitive element. At the moment, we're asking businesses to make these investments almost quasi-voluntarily. Yes, they can avoid some taxation or ETS costs and things like that. So there are market-bearing pressures on them. But we have to remove that voluntary and make it an even playing field, because that's the competitiveness bit out the window. And that has to be across Europe, because a lot of these big players are operating in a global market. So the problem is, you know, it's not just national competitiveness. Not only that, it's becoming that companies won't want to invest in Ireland if there's not clean energy available for them to run their business. For all of the, you know, the bits that we mentioned earlier, they won't be able to get access to finance because they won't have the proper ESG credentials. So look, it's a huge area. I accept, you know, I do accept the frustration that people have we're way away from where we need to be. There's different areas of the economy and energy sector that have performed a lot better, such as electricity. I would argue coming closely after electricity now is residential retrofit. There's 8 billion quid in the pot. There's a plan. There's a massive team of people in SEAI. Yes, there's supply chain constraints. Everything has problems and barriers, but there's a plan and it's being implemented. Industry, there's no plan. We really need to get to the place where there's a clear plan and clear signals are given to industry. This is the way to go. If you don't do it, you're going to get penalised. You know?
Well, on industry, every distillery in the country can save a massive amount of energy by recovering the latent heat.
Yeah.
Everybody cooking, every meat producer that cooks logs that are sliced up into ham and doing it in ovens can save about 80% of their energy by doing it using either oven heating electrically or doing it using microwaves. So
There are some ways. Norma, I'm going to stop you there just because I'd like to give somebody else the floor. We're out of time. Do you have a question, though, for our panel on industry and commercial sectors? Absolutely. Because we've had, well, it's just that I think we all agree on the big picture stuff that, like, we are out of time, in the world. But I would like to give the opportunity to anybody who has a question on industry and the commercial sectors to have a quick question.
My question was around energy performance contracts, and they seem to be a good way to stimulate decarbonisation in industry.
Yeah.
There's a question to Daniel, just what your recent experience is with energy performance contracts and how that kind of works from a finance point of view.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to say, if you could get a bit of bleak out of the room, you know, I am seeing a lot of positive activity within industry, and I think some of the things that are lacking maybe is the awareness. And in terms of energy performance contracting, you know, what we've realised as a business is the financial solution is really complicated, and there isn't the experience within the Irish pillar banks. They might say they're sustainable. It doesn't exist. So when you come to them with a complex proposition, they just. So anything we've done so far, we've self-financed. So that's very limiting. We can't do that. We're very close to putting finance solutions in place. I know Veolia here as well. They're doing stuff in the hospitals on a large scale. But I do like this is in EU legislation, and it's in our national climate action plan as a route. You know, so what it does is it de-risks it for businesses in terms of the risk transfers or stays with the contractor, and it's performance based. So if the contract isn't performing, it affects us in our pocket. So it is a really good model. I think it's in its infancy, which can be a difficulty. So if I go and explain it to somebody, initially they are very positive about it, and then they want to, as Irish people do, they want to shop around, and it's not a very large market to shop around in. So for me, having more competitors and more of me in the market is actually a positive. But it's definitely from the point of view of businesses trying to decarbonise, I think it's a really good route to look at, because it de-risks it for you. It'll bring the finance as part of that package, and it gives an ongoing relationship in terms of, like, we're involved in EU research, so that early lens on technology and legislative change, you know, and you know, on legislative change, that's another thing that we're slightly retarded here in Ireland. So EU directives aren't being transferred into national legislation quick enough. So Spain, Portugal, Greece are ahead of us. So they're developing technologies to support something that we're going to introduce at a later stage, and we're going to have to buy it from them. So that, to me, that a bit of a nonsense. But in terms of energy performance contracting, I think, and obviously you would say, well, he would say that,
Yes.
but I've talked all day about it, because I do think we looked at different ways of doing this, and we you know, what's come to the market from local authorities, interestingly, came via a European project. So Kadima did the Guarantee project probably 6 years ago, and that gave them the confidence to actually go to Dublin City Council saying, look, this is a model we think local authorities should embrace. They brought it to the market, we responded, and now you have contracts with other local authorities, and it you know, definitely in terms of large energy use. The other thing it does is it aggregates projects, so it bundles 8 buildings together in a package.
Okay, I think we're meant to be finished 6 minutes ago. I'm really sorry.
Apologies.
No, not your fault. I've taken questions. Will I take one more, or do you want to? Okay, one last
nobody's
question.
kicking us out of the room, yes.
Go ahead, yeah.
Do these fall under CSRs, like, you know, corporate social
Do what follow CSRs?
So like all these different, models and so on and so forth. So like say the global sustainability, do you have specific models that you have for say companies to invest their CSR budgets into? Just saying.
Yeah, so I suppose our interaction with corporate social responsibility agenda primarily has been on the environmental side. So it's been, energy, water, and waste. We have sometimes pivoted to other areas of CSR, but it's principally the environmental pillar of CSR we support.
Okay. Xavier, I'm conscious that you haven't spoken for a while. Would you like to give a last comment before
Yeah,
we
well,
close
just
up here?
one additional thought, I guess. And I think, there's so much talk about the electrification of heat, and that's extremely valid, but there's other options. And one of them, which I'm particularly interested in, is district heating. And, if we need big impact, I'm saying it's going to be fast, but it can be big impact. And we have a huge amount of waste heat around the place that's available from industry in particular, and we need to build infrastructure to use that to service the residential sector, the commercial sector, and decarbonise those sectors much quicker in urban centres where the potential is there to do it cost effectively. And we need, first of all, to raise awareness around that, and the renewable heat plan from SEAI and the one I worked on before that really emphasised the role of district heating in that regard, and I think that's going to be a fundamental piece of the jigsaw going forward. And it's also the integrative piece where you can capture waste heat, you can take the wind when it's not used for power purposes and turn it into heat. It's a lot more cheap, or it's a lot cheaper than hydrogen, for example, or biomethane for that matter. So it's one way to go for sure.
Thanks, Xavier. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap up here, and I'm going to give the last word to Lucy, but I'd like to thank my panellists in the meantime, and also thank the audience for a good discussion. I know it's a very short time, and we're not going to solve everything, but I think we've had at least a very enthusiastic discussion, and certainly I've enjoyed it. So thanks a lot for your participation.
Thank you.
Over to you, Lucy.
Great. Thank you.
Slide, but really the next slide is really just to thank everyone for joining us here today, and to thank all of our guests, our panel members, our chairs for the discussion, and all of you for the lovely questions and the lively debate. I can't change the slide, but I think it will change soon. Really to remind everyone again that SEAI's RD&D call will be launching next week, so keep an eye out for that. It's a great opportunity. I hope the debate today has sparked some ideas among you all, and that you might consider applying to the call. And I'm sorry, I can't change the slide. I don't know, is there any way that we can change centrally? Anyway, it's working now? No. No. Okay. Oh, that's the last slide. Oh, there's the next one. Yes. Oh, yes. Special thanks to all of our guests. And just to flag the research funding call, so the call operates under two key pillars, a topic strand and an open strand. So there'll be some key strategic topics prioritised, but there's also the opportunity to pitch your ideas, so a bottom-up approach to the open strand. And it's open to companies, and we really encourage collaboration, and I think there's lots of ideas today, so hopefully the Energy Show is a great opportunity to meet with others that you might collaborate with. Some of the key takeaways, and I'm sure everyone has their own, but really the urgent imperative for us to act, I think that's coming through a lot, and that we need to focus on impact now and decarbonisation and ramping up our progress towards those targets to make sure we don't miss them. And the importance of collaboration, so industry and academia working together, learning from each other, and building collaborative, co-produced solutions that can address our challenges. And again, that leads into the other key takeaway on transdisciplinary. It's not just an engineering solution. There's people at the heart of this. There's social sciences, finance, ecology, environmental. Everyone needs to work together. And there's huge opportunities here for businesses to grow their own businesses and to become more sustainable and to play their part as well. And just challenges too, but lots of opportunities. And then networking events. So this type of event, bringing people together. We'll have our conference later in the year, but it's really important to join events, meet new people, come up with ideas, and some of them will be online, some of them will be in person, but there's always opportunities. And to look at the supports for businesses, and Fergus has given a good overview of the supports in SEAI, but do have a look at our website for other ideas. And that's really my main thank you to everyone again, and to Podrick Lyons, especially in the Ierc, who co-produced today's panel and discussion ideas today, and for all of you for joining. So thank you all again, and thank you very much.